Hi everybody, Scott here. It's been a while since I've made a video for this channel. The foundation of this video is a spiritual one as opposed to a political one. I think the video will probably touch on political themes, but I'm not attempting to politicize it. This video is from a spiritual foundation, but those watching might be tempted to politicize what I'm saying. This will be coming from a Christian perspective, but I say the word Christian loosely because I've found as I've gone along that that word can mean a tremendous amount of different things, and essentially everyone who uses that word uses it can use it from a different point of view or from their own perspective, and I'm certainly using the word Christian from my own perspective. And I think as you, if you continue to watch this video, you'll just get the gist, I think, of where I'm coming from when I'm thinking of Christian ideas and Christian themes. So I became a Christian around the age of 16, and at that time my father put me on to a church that had an office that you could rent Christian videos from. And so I went through a period of time hiring out videos, and through conversations with my father and watching these videos, I became aware of what people were referring to the New World Order at that stage. So we're talking 1990, somewhere around there. And so I watched a whole heap of videos around the New World Order and end times and revelations and the one world government and the one world currency, and essentially, at least from this doctrine, the eventual mass murdering of anyone that professed to believe in Christ. I found that information very, very interesting. Like it really ignited my intuition about, finding out about hidden things, things that weren't in the mainstream, that, the idea of things going on behind the scenes that that were guiding us, but yet you couldn't find it anywhere in any mainstream anything. And the videos certainly provided a huge amount of evidence to support this agenda. I think the reality, though, for me, one of the results that I remember quite tangibly at that time was feeling hopeless. I was like, well, what's the point in achieving? What's the point in striving? What's the point in hoping for a future if in 20 years, 30 years time, I'm just going to get my head chopped off? And I actually believe that hopelessness was, you could say, a strategy of the evil one, the strategy of Satan, or whatever you want to call that, is essentially to disarm the followers of Christ by kind of clouding them in hopelessness, in the sense of what's the point? And I have a feeling today that was by design. So even though I was watching videos made by Christians about the New World Order and their plans, becoming enlightened, I was also very discouraged and had a sense of hopelessness about my own future. So skipping ahead a few years, I came in and out of Christianity for a number of years as just, I believe, part of my journey with God. It sort of brought me in and out of church as I tried to figure out the journey of life and all of that. And a lot of that New World Order, Illuminati stuff just kind of went into the background of my mind, of my thinking. And so speeding up to around 2012, well, no, let me back up. Let's go to 2001, and the World Trade Center, and the 9/11 and all of that. So I saw that live, like a lot of people did, from Australia. And I stayed up all night and watched the unfolding events of that day. And saw them crumbling down. And one of the things I've noticed about my intuition is that when something doesn't add up, sometimes that's really obvious. I'm like, hang on, something's not making sense here. And then when something does click into place, it's just like a real deep knowing, like, yes, this is true, this is correct. But when it's deception, when it's lies, half-truths, it's hard. It's more harder. It's like that middle ground. It's more harder to recognize. It's neither true or false. Essentially, it's like that doesn't resonate. So I, like everybody else, believed, okay, just the heavy destruction of the World Trade Center buildings, they just fell to the ground. And then hearing that World Trade Center 7 fell to the ground and all of this, and going, okay, you just listen to the mainstream narrative and you just go along with it. And but the reality was that nothing of that day made any sense in reality. But I believe essentially that 9/11 was it might sound weird to hear it said this way, but it was like a spell. And I say the word spell because it was deception. It's no different to saying witchcraft, because witchcraft essentially is just you could say telling a lie is witchcraft. Deception is witchcraft. Half-truths is witchcraft. So if we think of 9/11 from that perspective, it was witchcraft. It was a spell. Something happened before our eyes and we were told lies about it to cause us to believe a certain narrative around the event to guide us into the future. And I remember, the Patriot Act and all of this sort of stuff, and the Iraq War and all of that, the lead up to the Iraq War of the early 2000s, none of it made sense. But at the time, what can one do? You just kind of get on with your own life, and you watch what's going on, but don't, it just kind of washes over you essentially. So I watched that event and then forgot again, just sort of got on with life again, dealt with a lot of my own personal life issues and things like that for a number of years, until around 2012, where let's say I had a bit of time on my hands, and I think I just started looking in watching YouTube videos, and I was like reintroduced to the narrative of, again, the New World Order, the Illuminati, and all of this sort of stuff. And it was really quite interesting seeing it all afresh, having not looked at it for more than 20 years, around 20 years since I looked at it. And the first thing that I really started to be aware of was 9/11. And so I just started watching documentaries, lots of videos on the topic, and it started to make more sense to me. I was like, yeah, I didn't, like, at the time of 9/11, I didn't call BS essentially at the time, but nothing really sat right. But you just go along with it, and then you start seeing people questioning what happened. giving the timelines and events and people involved and the things that had to happen for the 9/11 to occur. And it didn't take too long before it was quite obvious that there's a hidden hand going on in all of that, and that the world has taken a very serious detour since that event. And so I did about from there, I just started looking into all of this whole thing again. But still, with, I think, that underlying tone of hopelessness. It's like, well, yeah, it looks like the agenda is pressing ahead. It looks like it's a little bit more available. Like for me, had to go down to a video store, a Christian video store, to find out information about the New World Order and all of that. But now it's all over YouTube for anybody to see. And so you start to discover people that are like trying to push the truth. You know, this is happening, and you find out all sorts of different things that have been occurring around the world. And for anyone that's watching this, that's on board with my way of thinking, would recognize that searching these matters out, which is essentially a scriptural principle, leads you down many interesting paths. You'll brush up against the UFO and the disclosure thing, and the are they demons or are they government craft or a bit of both? You find out about chemtrails and vaccines and the Federal Reserve and all of these things. There's so many to sort of, I can't put my finger on them all, but that gives a general idea. And so I just did a lot of research. You know, I looked into it. I watched a whole lot of stuff, and the way I work essentially is my intuition kind of guides me. You know, once I start trying to seek the truth deliberately, there's certain things that just don't resonate and they pass by, and then there's certain things that just hit the nail on the head and it makes a lot of sense. But in some respects, that whole thing is like the devil's playground, because you could almost say it's just part of Babylon. We're studying the tactics of Babylon that go back for centuries or millennia. And although I wouldn't have said that when I said that a few years ago when I was looking into all of this, since things have changed. As part of my journey, I started to recognize and have revelations, if you like, or just insights and awareness of God in ways that I hadn't before. Namely, the area that there's this dichotomy that people that go to church are in the kingdom and the people that don't go to church are outside of the kingdom. And I very painfully became aware of the falsity of that. In that there's lots of people inside the kingdom, there's lots of people inside church that are not in the kingdom, and there's a lot of people outside of church that are in the kingdom. And that it's a false paradigm. And with that awareness came a lot of freedom. That I was free actually to be inside of church or outside of church, but that God was with me in either place. And so that was just one thing that sort of happened in the midst of all of this. I think I say it partly because Babylon, which you could almost say is just the world system that we live in for the most part, and that it is controlled by a lot of lies, deceptions, and half-truths and false paradigms and so on. It's a system of control, essentially. And I recognize that the in-church, outside of church was just another control that had nothing to do with God and our relationship with Him. And so, skipping a few years of looking into this, I've never been a political person. Even up until a few years ago, when I would talk about politics, I would always say, "Hang on, is the left is what characterizes the left? What characterizes the right? Which is which?" I've never been one to really focus in on politics. I think I've come at things from, I'd say, a more Christian spiritual perspective, and I've seen things from through that lens, and some of that lens goes into the certain themes of politics, if you like, but I'm not looking at things through the political lens. So up to a few years ago, like I said, I wasn't really into politics at all. But as a part of looking into the New World Order and all of that, you do brush up against politics and who's doing what. And I think it's fair to say today that anyone born in the 70s, 70s generally speaking, when I look at America at least, there has not really been a left or right paradigm in a sense. It's been a globalist paradigm. And I'll probably go into that a little bit more later, but I realized, so a couple of years ago, as part of just my own research, I eventually started to get wind of, Donald Trump from, The Apprentice, this guy who's a rich guy from The Apprentice. So the context being, I'm in Australia. I haven't grown up with being aware of Donald Trump and all in the news and all of this sort of stuff. So all I really knew of him was that he was very wealthy and owned casinos and had that TV show. And I was like, oh, okay, he's running for president. And I think at the time I just sort of put it down to just some of the stranger things that come out of America. Maybe that would be a way of saying it. It's like, the celebrityism of America and all of that. So I started looking into that. That just sort of came across my path, and there were people that were, bashing that idea of him going for the presidency, and I didn't think much of it. I was, never really followed politics, like I said. And I watched a couple of videos, or it might have only been one video, by a guy by the name of Trey Smith, I think his name is, talking about the Trump prophecies. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Let me have a watch of this. And he went into, the Clintons and all of that, and Trump, and he actually went into like dates and things like that, things that on the day of his inauguration, he would have been 70 years, 7 months and 7 days old, and this sort of thing. And it seemed very interesting, but at the same time, I've always been a little bit hesitant to read numbers into things. But it was compelling, the video that I saw, and I'll leave a link in the description for it. And he was just like, and then he showed some clips from a guy by the name of Kim Clement, who prophesied in the early 2000s that Trump would become president. And that, so from a Christian perspective, that piqued my interest. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Again, I didn't think too much of it. And so I started watching, I think I started to see some of Donald Trump's rallies that he was conducting leading up to the elections. And there was an excitement and a positiveness and something like all of that going on when I would see these things. But I was still seeing it, I think, from from like through a glass darkly, let's say. And I started to watch the debates, and I think it was the second debate that I was listening to in my headphones. And this is going to sound a little unusual, and I had many years ago gotten away from the idea of God said, this is what God's doing in my life, this is what God's saying, this is what after talking like that for many years and then having events take place in my own life to suggest that I had no idea what God was really doing, which was a very good thing to come to realize. I've just moved away from trying to, say what I think God's doing. So just to hear me that it's coming from that place. It's not coming from a place where every other day I'm saying what I think God's doing and not doing and all of that. I'm more just trying to observe what I see and be open to what's happening as opposed to interpreting. But I was putting in a foundation for a water tank on my property, and I was digging it down and lay some sand and all of this sort of stuff. And I was down in the hole, sort of digging some more stuff out, listening to Donald Trump. And I'm not sure if anyone watching remembers this, but in that second debate, he was like, when I think back on it, he was focused, and there was just this sense. Now, I try to say this as non-political as I possibly can, was that it was like the God and Satan battling it out up on the platform. And that I didn't think that at the time, I should say. This is later, but at the time I was listening to Trump, and when he would talk, and I think because I was listening to it and not watching it, the audible became a lot more important to me as I was listening. And he was breathing through his nostrils before he was talking. And something about that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And again, it's going to sound unusual, but this guy, Trey Smith, when he was talking about the Clintons and what they've apparently been involved in and all of that sort of stuff, he was doing something similar in my memory. He was talking about them, and there was just this sense that I had, and I can only call it that, deep inside, that like when Trey Smith was breathing in, very similar to the way Donald Trump was breathing in, it was like they were breathing in the power of the Holy Spirit in order to stand up to the thing that they were speaking against. That's probably the best way I could describe it. And it was enough of a sudden impact on the inside of me that I had to drop the shovel and walk out of that foundation and just walk around the backyard just charged. And there might have been some tears involved and all of that, but I was just like, I felt hit like a ton of bricks. And it was at that moment that I felt like something lifted off of me. And the best way, one of the ways to describe it, if anyone's seen, I think it's Highlander 3, probably a pretty bad movie, but in that movie there was some kind of grid over the planet, and it was like red and black and dark, and everyone sort of lived underneath it. And part of the movie, had them sort of climbing up, I think, to get above the grid system, just to see the blue sky of the planet and all of that. And it was like that. It was like that grid system evaporated, and the truth was much easier to see. And I have since heard some people, it might have been Mark Taylor or Kim Clement talking that God laid over the world, if you like, a kind of blindness. And I got the sense that it was basically around like JFK onwards, or that kind of thing. It might have been beyond that. But the sense of that we've all been under a trance of some kind. We've all been blinded to some extent. Maybe because of God's judgment that we have bound ourselves to Babylon, the world system, that we came under it. I don't know exactly. These are just my own wonderings, and I don't put too much emphasis on it other than it's curious and interesting. But it seemed like that sense of hopelessness that I had when I was 16 went, and I didn't even, the thing is, I forgot or didn't even know it was there. It had kind of just gone underground and just became like a stronghold in the depth of my being that I believe has been around the whole world. Everyone's been under it. But I got the sense that for me personally, that moment, it broke and I was able to see a lot more clearly. And I've started to see lots of other people, both before, during and after me, have a similar experience. And people from all walks of life are starting to see the truth and speak from the truth from what's been broken. You know, basically it's that cliche of the red pill and the blue pill, who's awake and who's asleep. And I don't think it's got a lot to do with Trump. I don't think it's like Trump this, Trump that. There's some thoughts I have around that I'll share shortly. But what I believe is happening is God has said the time is now. And God's prophets have actually been prophesying this for some time. Kim Clement from around 2004, I think, or 2007, and Mark Taylor from 2011. And if you've looked at Mark Taylor's prophecies, it's unbelievable how accurate they're turning out to be. And what I'm sensing is God is saying the time has come for me to remove that veil, is the better word I should have used earlier. He's removed a veil off of the planet, off of this world, off of for anybody who is wanting to see the truth, to be able to now see it. And there's some that have and there's some that haven't. And it's not the truth of Trump, it's the truth of who God is and and the control Babylon New World Order system that we've all been indoctrinated into, like the frog in the pot of water slowly boiled up. We've gotten used to being under that system. And I'm starting to believe that, the plan has been, the New World Order plan has been to bring a New World Order, a one world government and all of that, and whoever bucks that system would be destroyed. And that somehow that narrative has been interpreted through Scripture, disabling the Christians from dealing with evil. And that's a thought in progress at the moment for me, because we've all grown up, if anyone's around my age, born in the 70s, 80s and that, the whole Jesus is coming back any day, we're going to be raptured and all of that has been a firm doctrine. And I don't know the truth of all of that. I choose not to. One of the strengths I think I have is that I don't hold firmly to beliefs like that, because I don't believe it matters. And I see a lot of people getting into a lot of strife, fighting for, pre-tribulation rapture, during or post, all of this sort of stuff. And I've chosen to back out of all of that. I think it's just problematic. And part of that lifting of the veil for me, and that hope was restored in my heart. I suddenly felt like there is hope for the future. There is hope for the next generation. And I lived under this sensation, this feeling that the next generation is gone. Any future generation beyond my own, and probably including my own, a history. There's really no future. And one of the thoughts that I have around that is, watching the news over all of these years, why is everything getting worse? Why is there less and less money in the government to do things? Why are things decaying? Why is it harder for us as a society? It doesn't make sense. Why? Why is that? Why isn't it things getting better and improving and becoming greater and more prosperous and all of that? In fact, I think that has been happening despite that mindset, in that the amount of people that have been moved out of poverty in the last 10 or 20 years has been apparently miraculous. But we don't hear that in the mainstream narrative. We just don't get to hear it. That part of the mainstream narrative I believe, is to speak deceptions and lies and half-truths to keep us confused and powerless. I'd go far now as to say that the mainstream media, for the most part, are part of an incantation, part of a spell that we choose to put ourselves under when we listen to it. Part of that is even the cadence of the way the news people speak. You could almost mimic them in the way in which they speak. And I think part of it is like a familiar cadence to penetrate into our thinking. And I look back over the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas and all of that, and nothing seems to be as it truly was. What was said publicly was the exact opposite of what was happening privately. And what I mean by that, from my own limited understanding, is things like the Patriot Act was there not to protect the patriots, which essentially are the American people, but to wage war on those that consider themselves patriots. And that patriots have become the terrorists in the eyes of the law. That if you stand up for America and its sovereignty, you are a terrorist. And it's unbelievable, the deception and the lies that have perpetrated into our thinking and into the culture, not just in America but around the world. And so there was a sense of hope for the future that I hadn't felt for a long time. And I just felt really, really in here like that God is speaking. God is doing something here. And I just think God is using Trump for some specific reasons. Now, the world hate him and judge him. And the Christian world, for the most part, judge him and hate him as well. And then there's just people all over the place in all the different pockets and all the different clubs and genders and so on that have seen the light. Not the light of Trump, the light of what God is doing, because a lot of people are still under the trance. They're still under the deception of Babylon and the narrative that we have been fed for most of our lives. And so I started to see the insanity of what's going on this planet from a new perspective. And I don't like the left-right paradigm, because I feel like for the most part the left and the right are doing this. Those that say they're on the right, or left, left and right, are under the same problem, essentially, which is judgment. The left judge the right, and the right judge the left, and you see it in the sense of the right calling the left crybabies and social justice warriors, and you're getting triggered. All of these things, which I feel is not the way to go about things. And then I see the left judging the right, the left saying that the right are full of hate and all of that, but at the same time, the left seem very hateful in the way in which they're labeling the right as hateful. So I see them both sides that are doing that are falling down. They're off on a tangent. Let's say it that way. And that those that are choosing I would just say the way of Christ, to keep it simple, which is a position of non-judgment. That if we all sat down and removed all of our judgments and perceptions and all of that, there's probably a lot that we agree on. But there is a dark force that has been playing itself out on this planet, going back millennia, but has been operating in our current lives under the radar, being essentially protected by mainstream media that have their vested interest in keeping things hidden. And incredible evil has been allowed to circumvent a lot of facets of society, including government. And that there's a sense now, as things have starting to come to the surface, and that's one of my main points that I want to make in this video, that it's not Trump doing something, it's God doing something. God is bringing things out into the open. He's bringing the truth of people's hearts out into the open. And I think it's part of that veil. He's removed the veil, and now the truth in people's hearts are being revealed. And I think that's one of the whys of why God is using Trump, because he is somebody that I believe almost God is using to help expose the hearts of people. If they're judging him, you've had affairs, you're a scumbag, rich guy, all that person is doing is exposing their own heart. They're not exposing Trump's heart. I have a sense that underneath the surface, Trump has a good heart. And I think that's one thing that we haven't experienced. People of my age, 30s and 40s, we haven't experienced a good king. If you're in Australia, you might say that about certain prime ministers, but I'd say in America, there hasn't been a good king for some time. And we know that Trump isn't a king, right? Every person in America essentially is a sovereign king due to the Constitution. But just what I'm saying is that, just for the sake of my illustration, Trump is a good king. He wants to do right by the people. And none of us have experienced that. And so I believe that's one of the main reasons God is using Trump. I mean, a lot of Christians would say, he's an embarrassment, and this and that and the other thing. But if we look back on Scripture, the type of people that God had relationship with and worked with fit the Trump criteria perfectly. And that he's exposing the hearts of Christians because Christians are judging him for being a casino owner or having affairs or this, that, and the other thing. And, if we see Christians, well, Christians harbour both the left and the right, but it's like the Christians are being exposed in their hearts for where they're at. And the left and the right are also being exposed where their hearts are, because of those that trumpet Trump to the point where they're hostile towards anyone that doesn't follow Trump. They're actually exposing the truth in their heart. They've got judgment, and they've got work to do. And those on the left that are also throwing a lot of stones at Trump are also exposing what's in their hearts. And I believe that's a big reason why Trump is in the position that he is in. The other reason, I think, is because he essentially does not care what people think. And that could be seen as arrogant, as, be seen negatively. But in the day and age that we're living in, and with the corruption and the level of evil that has been allowed to exist, a figurehead like that is required to stand in the gap, essentially, like Christ did, to stand in the gap while God does what he's doing. And that Trump's not doing it. He certainly has his role to play, but God is doing it. And Trump's far from perfect and all of that. He'll make mistakes and all of this. One of the other things I think people fall in the trap of is because of his political incorrectness, because he can have some colourful language and some things that even make me uncomfortable to hear or see. We lose sight of the bigger picture, that as a world, for the most part, while everything's been sugar-coated through politicians and the mainstream media, incredible evil has been going on behind the scenes. And so we're essentially having our ears tickled by media and politicians saying everything's fine and everything's great and go about your business, nothing to see here, giving us a false sense of security. And they all look very polished in the way that they talk, that we have been softened to an inch of our lives, basically. And there comes a guy who calls a spade, who doesn't mind telling people what he thinks of them, and we're almost traumatized by it because it's just so different and we've just become so soft. But I think we need to look at the bigger picture, because from everything that's starting to bubble up to the surface, that there's been crimes committed on children and women and people trafficking and sexual abuse of and SRA, satanic ritual abuse and things like that have been going on underneath the surface of all of this for a long, long time. And God is saying, that's it, that's enough. We're dealing with this now. Everyone's had an opportunity. Now it's time everyone's had an opportunity to move away from this kind of thing. Now he's starting to clean it up. And I don't think we've seen anything yet. And in a sense, and this goes into the video that I did on my other channel, which I'll leave a link to, which I spoke about a thin layer of this on my other channel. But it's going to be up to us about how much we're willing to open ourselves up to seeing what has really been going on this planet. Part of this ties into what Mark Taylor has said in his prophecies and in some of his interviews, that the Planned Parenthood and the abortion issue has basically been like the engine room for the cabal, the engine room for the satanic elite to exercise their power and control over the rest of us. So just picture that for a second, that the aborted babies are a sacrifice to Baal, to the evil one, to give power to those that would like to have their power and control over us. Complete insanity. And that it's possible, again, political stuff, but apparently things are going to be done around that area so that at least taxpayers' money isn't going to fund those sorts of practices. Behind this spirit, the spirit behind the New World Order essentially is death and murder, and that is both of the person, but it's also of the mind, the emotions, the soul, the spirit, the cognitions, the everything. Whatever it can corrupt, destroy, manipulate, it shall do that. A lot of us have been very lucky in one respect, that we haven't found ourselves in the darker end of that spectrum, where we've been led down a... so what I'm trying to say is, we're as children, we haven't ended up on the altar, sacrificial altar, and being abused and or sacrificed to the New World Order system. In saying that, we all have to a certain degree, and God is saying, I'm wanting to tear all that down. I'm wanting to destroy it all, and He's saying the time's not now. There is more to do, and it's open to those that want it. So the sense I have is anyone and everyone has an opportunity to come out of the New World Order mind control and mental control, if you like, and see the truth of what's really going on. And by default, in a sense, walk into the reality of who God is, because it's like those shackles stop us from seeing the reality of God in a lot of ways. And coming out from under that, we walk into, I think, being more easily reintroduced to the part of us that just knows who God is and who we are in Him. And that there are people outside the church, the people inside the church that are seeing it, and there's those in and outside of church that still believe that Trump is a horrific, demonic human being out to destroy the world, when in actual fact, I believe that part of the agenda that God has given Trump in the area that Trump has influence over, which is vast, is to help bring it down. And that it appears as though slowly but surely that the domino hasn't really tipped yet. I think the domino, in a sense, has tipped in regards to God has removed the veil, and we have a choice whether we want to get out from under it. But it's now up to us if we want it. But in regards to what's really been going on this planet, actually underneath the surface, flipping over so that it's all there for the world to see and cannot be denied, that's not yet happened. And it's going to be potentially an incredibly distressing time for those that are still asleep, for those that think that Trump is the evil one and that everyone's got to get rid of him before the world blows up, right? All of that sort of thing. There's a sense that there's going to be people that when they start to be exposed by the truth of what's really been going on by these people and behind the scenes, their whole world paradigm is going to be shattered. And that's going to cause a lot of people to be depressed, anxious, fearful, confused. So part of making this video is in a small way me putting my hand up to say, I think God's doing something. I think there are good times ahead. I think evil is being exposed and will be exposed in such a way that it's going to lead to a mass, dare I say, revival. But I don't want to think about it in the old way that I've heard that word. I just believe that people's eyes to the reality of God are going to be reopened with that veil being torn open and the truth of what's really been going on this planet is revealed. So this is a small attempt to say, if you're watching this post everything being revealed, if you end up here, I mean, who knows, this might not go anywhere, this video, or this video might just be for me to say, I want to put my hand up and say, I think God's doing a good thing on this planet, an incredibly amazing thing, that we're in biblical times, essentially, right now, where the magnitude of what's happening is on par with the exodus of the Israelites, of the parting of the Red Sea, of this sort of thing. And it's a very exciting time. And so if you've found this video, I hope it resonates. I hope it penetrates. I hope I'm right. I believe I'm right. I have a strong sense that I'm on the right track with a lot of my thinking here. There's always room for a bit of doubt and a bit of, I'm happy to be corrected here or there. But anyway, if this video sort of meets you on your heart level and is some way helpful to understanding some aspect of all that's going on in the world, that's great. And I guess it would be partly a message to those that are in church, that have had their eyes closed to the reality of all of this, which is not your fault, that have started to see what's really going on. This is a great time to be alive. This is God doing something, waking up the planet, bringing humanity back into the awareness of who God is, what Christ did, and that there's more time, that a good thing has happened or is happening right now, and that God is in it, God is in control of it, and God is wanting to set the captives free. And that is my understanding, that is my sense of things, and it's just really up to us if we want to put our hands up and say, yes, I want truth, I want to know the truth, and I want to be set free with the acknowledgement of that truth. That truth is who we are in God. That truth is what is going on in this planet. This is the truth of the unfortunate role that mainstream churches had at keeping God's people blind and spiritually naked. But all of this is all going to change and bring people into a greater, help grow people in who God is, but also who they are, who we are in God. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that point. I hope that this video finds you in all that God has, and I'll see you again in another video.